and I'm going to present my PowerPoint on evidence for mimicry, cloaking, telepathy, deception, and intrusion by endemic aliens in the Hudson and Wallkill River Valley of New York.
Do you know what this is all about?
I'm not sure yet, but I think we're gonna find out soon.
Back in 1992, I discovered that I lived near a UFO hotspot. I contacted Ellen Crystal, who wrote about this hotspot in her new book, Silent Invasion, which was published in 1991. I went out into the field with her and saw UAP on my first night out. I took time exposures to document flight paths of UAP and recorded their sounds in order to compare them with conventional aircraft. I began a 24 square mile magnetic survey in order to detect unnatural underground EM activity. In conducting my magnetic survey, I went out after work and on the weekends and took magnetic readings along roads and across fields in this area, developing a map that was intended to show the type of magnetic activity that might occur underneath. Ellen Crystal had suggested that the area was underlain by an alien base, and I felt that by detecting them with my magnetometer, I could support and confirm her suggestion or theory, which I did. I used an ENG proton precession magnetometer borrowed from Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. Then, on the 18th of June, 1992, while taking magnetic readings, I was shot and implanted with a tracking device by a magnetic weapon of some sort. If you look at the graph in the center of the top picture, you will see the magnitude of a negative 495 gamma that happened just as I pushed the button to take another reading on the side of the road in front of that house. I saw my shirt move in and out, and but I felt a sting, but I didn't feel any internal pain, and so I continued to take measurements until the background recordings were normal for that location, since I had already taken about 4 recordings before the shot rang out. And I then put my instrument in the back of my truck and drove home. I took off my shirt and I saw this bruise on my lower left chest. It was about a size of a quarter, indented, had a red dot at the center. It wasn't until about 10 days later that I started to pass blood, and I went to my doctor in Suffern, New York. You can see the location in the lower image where the X is shown and the direction that the shot came from across that field. On my way home, I was met by a UAP at the Harriman exit on the New York Thruway. And here I illustrate that exit with the UAP simulated over the toll exchange between 2 of the street lights. It had a white golden light with a red dot behind it. After I passed through the toll exchange, it came up over my truck as I was traveling west on Route 17, and then paced me all the way home. When I got home, I ran in and got my camera, came out, and I took a picture of it where it parked in the sky to the northwest of my condominium. I checked the star maps and there was no bright star in that location. Then on the 23rd of June, 1992, only 5 days after I had been shot, I photographed a UAP rising up above the Thompson Ridge, which was to our west. We were located on West Searsville Road at the Dogleg Bend, and there were a group of us, Ellen Crystal and two other of her friends, and I were there. We witnessed this, and I took this time exposure. You can see an oscillating, bright oscillating light moving from right to left or from north to south, and it stopped in the middle of its tracks and backed up and then moved forward. I don't know of very many airplanes that can do this silently. In the distance in the background, you can see the strobes of a conventional plane.
Oh, it's tilting. Oh,
Hey,
man.
He's going into Stewart.
Look at this ain't this is coming our way. Where are we? Oh, jeez, I'm screwing this up big time here.
Now, without a flash, you'd pick him up on a film, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you don't need the flash if you're aiming at the sky.
I'm afraid it isn't making any noise.
Not yet, but it's very big. Where are we? Well,
That's like we saw the other night, Ralph.
now there's some
Now you got
noise.
a jet noise.
Yeah, but this was hanging around too long. This was from 15 minutes ago.
Now, why is he so low? That's my point.
Well, I don't know, but I got video and that's what I wanted to see.
The one the other night we saw was about half closer to this one.
Whoops.
That's a turbo.
Oy, oy, oy. The problem with looking through this is I can't see with my naked eye. That's the problem, but...
Now, do the UFOs ever make a simulation?
Yeah, they make all kinds of stuff. Now there's some
Now you
noise.
got a jet noise.
Yeah, but this was hanging around too long. This was from 15 minutes ago.
Now, why is he so low? That's my point.
I don't know, but I got video and that's what I wanted to see.
The one the other night we saw was about half closer to this one.
Whoops.
That's a turbo.
Oy, oy, oy. The problem with looking through this is I can't see with my naked eye. That's the problem, but...
Now, do the UFOs ever make a simulation?
Yeah, they make all kinds of stuff.
One of the larger anti-gravity craft that Ellen Crystal and I witnessed in the valley was the manta ray, described as a ship, a diamond-shaped ship that resembled that of the fish, the manta ray. And I recorded it many times within the valley during my 11-year period. Showing here the encounter that we had with the manta ray on the 9th and 10th of August 1996. Tommy Sinisi was with me. We were parked on the side of Thompson Ridge overlooking the hot spot and the Dogleg Bend in West Searsville Road. And the manta ray lifted off from the local forest, rose to a certain altitude of maybe 1,000 feet, and then started to travel south, and soon thereafter, it turned on more lights and turned west and passed right over us on that ridge. It produced very significant sounds that came out, presumably to resemble that of a either conventional jet or maybe even trying to mimic the Galaxy C5 transport that there was a C5 training base at Stewart Airport on the other side of the valley. And here you're going to hear the sound of this very unusual craft that it made, and it could turn that sound off at any time. But the significance of it is that it is a synthetic sound. It is a reverse Doppler. It violates the Doppler law, and it's composed, as I'll show you, of 10 to 12 individual frequencies, unlike that of any conventional jet sound.
Boy, listen to that weird sound.
To give you a comparison with that of the C5 and the sound that it makes, I'm going to show you or let you listen to that a C5 taking off from Stewart Airport momentarily. But this is the path with a daytime shot showing it rising up over above the forest, out of the forest, and then proceeding south and then turning towards us. You can hear all the dogs barking. The sound was that loud. And you also probably realize that the frequency of that sound decreased as the sound source approached the microphone. And then the sound frequency would increase as the sound source moved away from the microphone. Here's a C5 sound, and you can see from the spectrogram at the bottom that it is a normal Doppler effect, where the frequencies rise as the sound source approaches the microphone and the frequencies drop as it moved away. The reason why these UAP produce reverse Doppler is because of the metamaterial hulls that they contain that inverts and creates a negative refraction, and literally it changes the sound, inverts it so that it is opposite that of a normal Doppler. was at Stewart Airport at the time and recorded it as a C-5 took off and flew over me. Now compare that with the sound from the manta ray, and again, this sound on the right, the spectrograms, the amplitude as well as the frequency shows 8 or more individual frequencies banded together to create the sound, quite different from that of a normal aircraft jet engine sound. And I show pictures of the manta ray from the 20th of August 2003 on the left, where you can begin to see the chevron shape of the front of the craft as well as the tail light sticking out the back. If you pay attention to the sound coming from a conventional jet, usually you will not hear very much of that sound until the jet is directly on top of you, and you can begin to hear the sound of coming out of the engines, the back of the engines. But if you'll notice here, when this manta ray was producing this sound, the amplitude continued to increase from as much as half a mile away and to a maximum when the manta ray was directly overhead, and then you can see in the top graph the amplitude continued to drop as it moved away. But you'll notice that in the bottom graph, all the frequencies continue to drop and lower and lower frequency until you get to the far right when they start to rise back up again. On the 28th of April, 1993, a black triangle flew over Ellen Crystal and me as we are standing at the Dogleg Bend on West Searsville Road. It created a very loud sound, similar to that of a jet. But as you can see in the frequency spectrogram at the top of the slide, the sound was reverse Doppler. That is, it decreased in frequency as the craft and the sound source approached us, and then as it moved away from us, the frequencies increased. Also, you can see that the craft, after it passed over us, arced over us, it dove behind trees to the east in a farmer's field. Not something you would expect a conventional military jet to do.
Whoops. Still not clear. I think this is the military something or other. Whoops, I'm shaking. Whoa, it's loud. Wait a minute. That body is solid. That body is solid. Where the hell is it? Did you see the body on that? No. It was solid. That was a solid body. It was a solid triangle body with extra things in the front and back. Shit. I took the video camera away because I wanted to get a better look at it.
The black triangle that flew over us on the 28th of April, 1993, did something rather spectacular. I took time exposures while Ellen Crystal took a video of this event. As the craft came towards us flying from west to east, just after sunset, with still the sun glowing in the background, it made movements of its central white plasma lights that occurred right after I opened the shutter of my camera and right before I closed the shutter of my camera. And it did it for the three shown time exposures. Each time it moved its lights off of the central part of the craft out into the space around the craft. And between the first and the second time exposure, you can actually see a dance of the central lights. And then on the second time exposure, those lights came back online, and the running lights, the red and green running lights, were turned back on. The only way this could have happened is if the pilot knew exactly when I was opening and closing the shutter of my camera. Unfortunately, you can't assume that the pilot was just listening to me calling out the open shutter, close shutter, because he would not have known when I was going to close the shutter only through reading my thoughts. So this is a beautiful example of how the pilots were capable of reading my mind and knowing what I was thinking. And only when I stopped my inner voice did they stop making movements of their lights. And here you can see a close-up of the central lights moving offline, and if you take a ruler, you can put it along the connection between the two and see that the craft did not move at all. It stayed online with that same movement, but the plasma lights were what were moved. One of the amazing events that we did have were the performances of skyglyphs, as I call them, where the craft would rise up from behind the tree lines across the field to the east of us at the Dogleg Bend. And in this particular case, both Ellen, Crystal, and I were taking time exposures of this event on the 2nd of June, 1993. What you can see in the first time exposure is that as this white bright light was passing through cloud layers, it was dimmed or obscured. In the upper right image, you can see that just before the shutter closed, a red ball of light came out and went down below towards the ground and did a series of loops. My friend Bob Tarantino discovered that this was a reverse image of the treble clef, the musical note that I show in the bottom, how it resembles that, symbolizing reverse Doppler, which is very significant. Also, Ellen Crystal's image did not contain the movements in the third time exposure right before the light disappeared into the overhead cloud, whereas mine does contain this left and right jagged motion, indicating that each of us received a different image to our cameras and to our eyes. Dr. Jack Sarfati described to me how the tic-tac that has become popular in the news and media was propelled. He says, the tic-tac has a double hull with metamaterial in between. Negative susceptibility at stern expands space anti-gravity near field. Positive at bow contracts space, i.e. Alcubierre. Every pixel on the hull surface has controlled electric and magnetic susceptibility to execute low-power geodesic warp drive flight maneuvers. Gravity redshift, not the same as Doppler, happens when you go, example, from a low gravity potential, example, GM over R, to a high gravity potential, GM over R prime, where R prime is greater than R, so that the GM R is over R is is less than the GM R prime. You get a gravity blue shift the other way. The corresponding curvatures of GM over C to the power of 2R to the power 3, etc. Jack continues to explain why you get a reverse Doppler in front and back of a anti-gravity craft. The gravity frequency shift works opposite to the Doppler motion frequency shift. So if the flying saucer is in a low power warp drive via my G over C to the power 4 effect, the bow coming towards you has positive attractive gravity redshift working against the motion Doppler blue shift. Similarly, reversal for the stern moving away. Therefore, I claim that your reverse Doppler data is direct evidence for my low power warp drive overpowering the motion Doppler shift. Here's pictures of the metamaterial hull of a crashed UAP in the UK. The crash occurred at Llanillar near Aberystwyth, UK. This event did not become a famous story as did the U.S. equivalent in Roswell, New Mexico. The crash of the UAP appeared in only one newspaper, The Express, which ran a story titled Strange Debris Out of the Sky on January 23, 1983. You can see the honeycomb structure of the hull material that creates the anti-gravity influence, the negative refraction index, and the reverse Doppler. Looks something like that of a beehive. One thing that we were exposed to out in the field, once the crafts came to us, were producing skyglyphs. This is perhaps one of the most spectacular skyglyphs that I have a series of pictures of. You can see that there are multiple time exposures that were required in order to capture the full movement of the lights. And the image that it created when you put these time exposures together, is that of a giant S in the night sky. You can also see that the craft rose vertically right above the trees and dimmed its bright lights and also turned off its navigation green and red lights, then turned the the bright lights back on to the extent that it ionized the air around the craft, producing a glow that is typically seen with many UFOs, giving us the fire in the sky. And then it curved back up and went south, shutting off its two outer bright lights and then turning on one, and then off to the right beyond the top time exposure, it turned on the left as it moved away. And I show a symbol of the Superman S to show the resemblance. This is an enlargement of the negative to show the vertical movement as it climbed, and it did this silently. You can see with the red arrows where the running lights, the red and green outboard running lights, were turned off and then turned back on. and a picture of the manta ray during a performance in front of the sightings film crew. One of the things that I began to realize is why they were demonstrating lights that resembled that of the conventional aircraft in the area. Keep in mind that these triangles and diamonds were flying usually below 1,500 feet in the valley when you had commercial and military aircraft traversing the valley going to Stewart Air Force Base and International Airport on the other side of the valley. And here I show examples superimposed in the lower left image of the lights of the flying triangle in the upper left and the DC-9, which is a common carrier at International Airport, Stewart. And you can see that the strobes on the wings of the DC-9, when they flash in the lower right image, illuminate a tail. But you do not see that in the flying triangle. There is no tail. And even though the lights are very close, the idea for doing this was to create an illusion that the craft was a commercial aircraft or military aircraft and not an extraterrestrial craft. I was given a flyover at Pine Bush on the 4th of June, 1997. And I again show that there was a boom sticking out in front of the triangle, as Ellen Crystal says.
That was a solid body. It was a solid triangle body with extra things in the front and back.
And there were two lights on this boom that were used to resemble the two lights on the forward fuselage of the DC-10 and also the DC-9. And here you can see that these forward lights were deliberately rotated in different directions as this triangle flew over me, showing evidence that they are artificial. They are not mounted in a forward fuselage on the black triangle. And again, more comparison of the FT and a DC-9 here in this particular case, and you can see the tail is visible in the third shot on the right side, whereas there is no tail, but there is something out there on the end of a boom that reflects a little bit of light in order to create the illusion that the FT is a DC-9. So whose technology is this? Is this technology foreign or alien, that is ETV, extraterrestrial vehicle? Or is this secret military hardware, ARV, alien reproduction vehicle? How old is this technology? Is our military working with non-humans? What was scientifically documented in the field with 140 close encounter sightings? David Wilcock, in a recent YouTube video, gives evidence that the Navy has an anti-gravity craft, that it actually published a patent for a craft that it is possible to envision a hybrid aerospace undersea craft, HAUC, which due to the physical mechanism enabled with the inertial mass reduction device can function as a submersible craft capable of extreme underwater speeds and enhanced stealth capabilities. The patent continues. This hybrid craft would move with great ease through the air, space, water mediums by being enclosed in a vacuum plasma bubble or sheath. And thus we have evidence now, or at least the Navy U.S. Navy claiming that it has successfully reverse engineered an alien craft. My work in the field is largely started and continued the work of Dr. Ellen Crystal, who unfortunately passed away in 2002 from pancreatic cancer. She published a book in 1991, Silent Invasion, which was instrumental in my getting involved with her in studying this phenomenon. She also presented a picture of a black triangle hovering over the Jewish cemetery, which I'll be talking about later in this talk. These shapes are not your typical discs, triangles, and cigar shapes that we saw and witnessed in the Wallkill River Valley. As you can see, the ones on the left are just modified triangles. The one at the bottom left has booms sticking out in front with lights on it. Also, the manta ray is shown on the far right, and it can illuminate rows of lights on its belly. But we also had in the valley UAP that resembled conventional aircraft, and I've documented this in my websites, that they can fly these craft around. They're usually solid black or solid white with no windows on them, no cockpit windows, and no engines on their fuselage or wings. This is something that a number of experiencers and researchers have come to acknowledge, that the visitors are flying craft that closely resemble our craft, but they do not depend on external engines for flight. Of one of these camouflaged aircraft that resembled a conventional aircraft, in this case a Boeing 707, that literally met me on my way home from Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory and followed me home, where I got numerous pictures of it. Have you ever been followed home by a Boeing 707? You can see in the map on the right a blue star where my truck was located. This event took place between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m., just before sunset, and ended with sunset. I initially saw what appeared to be a large aircraft flying very low above the trees on the right side of the highway as I approached the Harriman exit. In the photograph you can see on the lower left. As it approached, it flashed its headlights 3 times, and I thought that maybe the aircraft was in trouble. It might have been coming from Stewart Air Force Base, which was further up the highway, and that it was going to land or crash on the highway. As I approached, I noticed that it continued to fly right towards me on the right side and then bank in front of me from right to left, but it traversed the highway very slowly. I saw that it was completely black, resembled the outline of a Boeing 707. It had no windows on its fuselage or in the cockpit in the front, and it had no markings on it whatsoever. It also had no engines on its wings or on its fuselage, and it traveled very slowly across the highway. I continued to the exit for Route 17 and then traveled west. That you can see on the map on the right, I give the locations where I saw it: truck 1, truck 2, truck 3, truck 4. I was driving my pickup at the time, and the craft then reappeared ahead of me after the toll exit and traveled across the highway very low above the trees from left to right. I was really puzzled at this time as to what in the world was going on. It was clearly either a pilot was in a lot of trouble and looking for a place to crash his plane, or this was a demonstration before me. Then I traveled further up the road, and I saw it again coming from, this time, right to left, across the highway about a half a mile ahead of me. I continued on the highway towards the west, and at Truck 4's station, I saw the craft again travel across the highway, from this time again from left to right, and that's the last time I saw it before I got home. When I got home, as I was exiting the 17 and to get on Route 211 East, I had to stop at the bottom of the exit ramp. And as I was exiting, I saw this aircraft coming towards me again. It was dark now, the sun had set, and when I got to the bottom of the exit ramp, I was looking for it, couldn't find it. Then the light turned green, and I turned right onto 211 East, and this aircraft started to move ahead of me. It was apparently had stopped and hovered above me, waiting for the light to change also. As I drove towards my condo on 211 East, it moved ahead of me a little bit faster than the traffic. I was traveling 45 miles an hour, and I was nearly keeping up with it. And the stall speed of a Boeing 707 is over 150 knots. So you're talking about a conventional-looking aircraft that could not stay in the air, traveling at very low speeds. When I got home, I ran in and got my camera and tripod, set it up on the lawn out at the intersection of 211 East, and waited. Something told me that it was going to be back, and it came back. It came right back down 211 East, traveling, this would be traveling north from the south, and it flew over me, and then circled around and came and flew over me again. And I got a whole series of time exposures of it flying above me. And I had a chopper device on my camera that split the time exposure up into segments. The picture that you see in the upper left is one of the more spectacular images of it traveling above me, all lit up with navigation lights and belly lights. You can see the time exposure, the traces are split up in the top of the image due to the chopper device, and it's from that and the estimated width of it, which I used the wingspan of a 747 of 146 feet to determine its speed. And you can look at the bottom of the graph, the slide, and see the different speeds that I calculated for it as it came over me several times. 25 miles per hour, 27 miles per hour, 53 miles per hour, 32 miles per hour, well below stall speed of a Boeing 707. This is what I mean by the visitors using conventional airframes to camouflage their behavior and presence in the valley. The work that I did was concentrated in and around the area of Pine Bush, New York. Here I show the study area along with the UFO corridor, as it has become known, that extends out to Montauk, Long Island, and west of Pine Bush as well. All of this is north of New York City. The specific area of my research with Ellen Crystal is shown on this map. We have Pine Bush, the town, located to the upper left of the map, and Stewart Army and Air Force Base to the upper right of the map. Plus, the red arrow shows a defunct Special Air Ops airstrip that is just above the location of the map. And we have the small town of Montgomery to the lower left of the map. You can see a green dot in the center, which represents the center of the UFO hotspot, as we became known, and that's what Ellen Crystal showed me very early in my involvement with her, and in June and July of 1992. And that is also the location of the underground alien base. Here I show the 24 square mile magnetic map of the Wallkill River Valley between Montgomery, Walden, Wallkill, and Pine Bush. The purple asterisks represent magnetic highs that may be the tops of buried mountains embedded within the bedrock, which were once exposed as islands in an ancient 420 million year old Ordovician sea. This is very important to understand the geology and structure of the rocks below the surface, where the aliens have built their underground bases. You can also see from the key in the upper right that the natural magnetic tendency of the rocks is highest in the south and decreases towards the north, and the red arrow represents the axis of an anticline in the valley. There is a strong correlation between AOP or UAP activity, represented by the green circles, in the valley and magnetic anomalies, the red and clear ellipses, indicating some type of relationship. The question is this relationship due to a preference of AOP or UAP for iron-bearing igneous formations underground, or is it because the natural magnetic anomalies provide a measure of camouflage against easy detection of artificial magnetic activity underground? And this will give you an idea of why I was created such a fuss when I went out there and started my magnetic survey. And on the 18th of June, 1992, I was shot and implanted with a tracking device. And from that point on, the craft would follow me around the valley. UAP activity over the hotspot, 1992. The hotspot was brought to my attention by Dr. Ellen Crystal, and here I overlay time exposures from multiple sightings that we had in 1992 to show the amount of activity over this one specific area of craft rising up from underground through the trees and disappearing back into the trees and below ground. This is one example that occurred on the 2nd of July, 1992 on West Searsville Road, Montgomery, New York. You can see the tree line at the bottom, and the light, when it blinked on, it then rose up in a very jagged pattern, and at a specific height, it brightened intensely. It rose up further in altitude and then dimmed down and proceeded to travel south. And here is another example of one of these craft brightening its plasma lights. I show the picture of the negative in the upper left corner, and you can actually see strobes around a central light that is bumbling around, moving irregularly, whereas you can see airplane light strobes in the lower part of the same image, all taken from the same location at the Dogleg Bend and West Searsville Road. You saw a whole bunch of lights coming in, and then one large light disappearing right into the ground of the county line farm, which is in the northern part of Orange County, in the center of the valley. This was quite spectacular. We've seen a lot of activity around this area, so that there is another entrance into this underground base at that location. But why do I think that these craft have been around for a lot longer than the European settlers were in the valley? I refer to them as spirit lights over the hot spot. Why was there so much UAP activity over this one specific area? And it wasn't until 1994 that I had the opportunity to fly over this area in a helicopter, and I imaged a circular mound, oval to hexagonal mound on the Owens farm. The red arrow at the top shows the Dogleg Bend where we were stationed, and usually looking east towards this mound. And you can see that directly to the west of it, there is a permanent crop circle with some trees at the center of it. And the farmers have maintained the field within there and preserved the outline of an ancient Indian sweat lodge. And to give you an idea what the significance of these two features here on the ground, I show Susan Martinez's image from her book, The Lost History of the Little People, Mounds and More Mounds, in which she details a Indian or Native American sweat lodge, and how you have a fire pit on a mound called an uncus to the east of it, and then the circular area on the ground was where the sweat lodge was built, and you have a path connecting the center of that sweat lodge with the fire mound on the Indian mound. The important thing to realize is that the stones that were heated up to create the sweat in the sweat lodge were heated by this fire and then carried into the lodge, where they were doused with water to produce steam. And so this is what we were seeing from the air, is the remnants of this Lenape Indian sweat lodge. So why did they build a sweat lodge in that location? On the 31st of May, 1995, I was at the Dogleg Bend on West Searsville Road, looking east, and I saw a plasma light flying over the hotspot area. You can see this image in the top photograph. And we know it was a plasma light because it sputtered out as it flew over the top of the Indian mound that is positioned below it in the lower photograph. And as I had the shutter open, taking this time exposure, there was a flash. And it wasn't until later that I realized that the flash came from this Indian mound, and you can see it on the time exposure in the shape of a golden pyramid with light coming up through the middle. Ironically, pyramid means pyro, mid, or light in the middle. So they were deliberately creating for my camera an image of the significance of that Indian mound in the lower image. Also, what is important is that when we went out there with our magnetometers and checked that mound, we found a magnetic pyramid positioned on top of that mound, such that whenever if we set the sensitivity to the magnetometer so that it would go off, and as we climbed the mound, the magnetic trigger got higher and higher until a peak over the center of the mound. Here's some of the data that I collected with the proton magnetometer for this area. You can see the center of that Indian mound as the red dot, and all of the measurements that I took and the path that I took across that region. But in the darker numbers around the mound, there was a significant anomaly taking place, with the magnetometer you get high anomalous readings in that region. Here's an example of those readings taken from those magnetic stations. You can see very clearly that there is a huge jump in magnetism on the left, the red, over the mound and around the mound, and then when I move beyond it, it goes back to a normal magnetic readings in the blue. That is significant because that indicates that this area is highly active magnetically. And this was proven out, borne out, on the 2nd of July, 1992, when Ellen Crystal and I were located at the Dogleg Bend, and we saw lights going down and traveling around very close to the ground behind and below the tops of the trees, as you can see in the top picture. And then we saw what appeared to be another set of lights coming in to the location of the Indian Mound.
What is that?
That's either a UFO or a plane getting ready to land in the field.
Yeah, in front of us. Oh, man. Look at this ain't this is coming our way.
We saw the light getting lower and lower as if it was coming in for a landing on that mound or farm field, and then suddenly the pilot saw the trees and the ground coming up, and he reversed direction and turned on his engines full power, and we heard this roaring as the DC-9 climbed slowly up back into the air, and we could see on the tail of the aircraft the symbol for American Airlines. So a pilot almost crashed into that field. And why did he do that? Probably because of the magnetic activity in that area was influencing and corrupting his electronics, and made the plane's automatic system think that this was the place to land. On the 29th of April, 1993, Ellen Crystal took this photograph. I was there with her, and along with the sightings camera crew, and we saw all of these strange lights flying around, plasma lights. And you'll notice the one that goes from left to right across the tree line there, that it actually wraps around one of the trees. And at this particular time, we also got a strange image of what appears to be a ghost building in the woods. But there is no building in that location, but that area did light up. So what was scientifically documented in the field? Performances by the manta ray-shaped craft. On the 29th of April, 1993, performance was done before a sightings TV camera crew, 7 witnesses near Pine Bush, New York. 6 craft filled the eastern sky within a 15-minute time period. Details of light movements indicate choreographed synchronicity that falsifies airplane hypothesis. 2 craft, Fly, Triangle, and Manta Ray, make separate runs at observers and cameras, professional cameras, doing aerobatic maneuvers, right-angle turns, flying below stall speed and vertical to the ground, and turning on banks of belly lights.
Geez, looks like a congregation, whatever they are.
Yeah, what the hell? What is going on there?
I've never seen this before.
There's 4. I got all 4 in the video.
And this is a composite of all of the different time exposures that I took that night. And pasting them together, you can see the flight paths of the 6 different UAP. Quite spectacular. Then I also superimpose the daytime image to show you where the tree line is and the compass directions for all of this activity. Here you can see the enlargements of the each of the light traces, time exposures of the 4 craft that are visible in that top left time exposure. You can also notice that each one of them produces what I call a tail at the beginning of the time exposure. When the shutter was opened, they all made these tails, at the end. This is a single shot, single one frame of a time exposure. But if you carefully look and measure the angles of those tails, they're all at a different angle: 54 degrees, 52 degrees, 66 degrees, and 45 degrees, indicating that this was not the movement of my camera that created this illusion, because you would have gotten the exact same angle of orientation of all of those tails if it had been camera vibration causing this.
No, well, not even a C5. The C5 we would still be able to see wings
I
and
remember we
fuselage.
seen C5s and you'd hear
Yeah.
5 miles away.
Yeah.
We didn't hear
See,
that.
that came to us and turned at us. You know, this is awfully big not to hear sound now.
And just low to the ground.
Oh boy. Yeah, this is shipped. I mean, a C5 isn't going to bank like that. The hell? Oh, look at this. The hell?
Holy shit.
The hell is that?
Here you can see the manta ray banking and turning towards us and flying right in front of all of the cameras and camera crew. And it's flying very slowly, less than 50 miles an hour, and it's turned vertically, so that if this was a C-5 military transport plane, it couldn't stay in the air at that speed with its wings vertical to the ground. And that's an outline of what we saw as it flew by and then dove behind the tree line in the neighboring field again, presumably going back down into its underground base. This manta ray hovered and stayed in that one location, waiting for a black triangle to do its initial movement, fly around in front of us, and then it took off and flew in front of us, as you can see in this series of shots from Ellen's video and my time exposure superimposed. And then when it got right in front of us, you can see the whole bank of lights on its belly lighting up. This craft made an impossible turn for a fixed-wing aircraft, flying at 30 miles per hour without falling out of the sky. So we're clearly dealing with technology that is beyond our conventional fixed-wing aircraft. And that is an outline of the shape and of its flight path. It's minimum 50 to 60 degree turn at under 52 knots or 60 miles an hour. Maximum distance traveled in 6 minutes, 3 miles, average speed 30 miles per hour. That was the sound that it produced as it flew by us. Then, on 4 May 2000, Barbara Hartwell and I were at the Dog Leg Bend again, waiting for something to happen, and to the east we see this pair of lights coming towards us in the upper right animated GIF. And I've put images from that video on the left with the outlines of the trees in the foreground, so that you can see that just how low this object was at a distance as it was coming towards us. It was flaring its lights, blinking its lights, and then it turned to the right or to the south, and you can see 2 tiers of lights on it, something that you don't get in a conventional aircraft except for the 747, where you have an upper deck.
Whoa, 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 whoa. What the hell is this thing?
Bruce, I've seen things like this before here. This looks like a real thing. What the hell?
This is
Look
huge.
And it's bright.
It's slowly coming towards us.
Why is it so bright?
And right after that, we had this coming at us and flew directly over us.
Whoa. Just turned on searchlights. What the hell? Yeah, pointing down.
I've had many questions as to why they put their brightest lights out at the lateral port and starboard side of this man array. And it became clear as we began to get more data that this is not a conventional aircraft, because landing lights at that distance from the pilots in the center wouldn't illuminate a runway on a conventional tarmac. However, Ellen, in her book, noted tunnels opening up in the middle of a field right in front of her and warm air coming out of these tunnels. And it became apparent that these lateral lights were used to illuminate the sides of the tunnels when these craft disappeared into the ground, into their underground bases. Performance by a manta ray-shaped craft. On the 20th of August, 2003, another performance was done before two witnesses over a horse farm at Salt Point, New York. Typically, it started with brightening of lights from a hovering position, then a run at observers, and an aeromagnetically impossible turn for a fixed-wing aircraft. Here's maps of the Salt Point and the locations of an underground alien base that Billy McNamara pointed out to me after he invited me to stay with us at his parents' house there near the Cone A, Red Cone A. And there was a path in Red Cone C that goes down to where the entrance to an underground base is at Red Cone B. This is Billy, who invited me to and showed me around the property and what was going on in his area. He called me out of the blue and said, "I've seen your website, seen all the things it said, and I think we got the manta ray flying around my home." And he invited me out, and sure enough, that's exactly what we found.
Yeah, that is the manta ray. Yeah. This is, oh God, this is one. This is huge. All right. This is typical triangular craft lights. Oh yeah, golden. Bingo. We got a craft.
No, it's blinking in the middle.
Doesn't matter. That's exactly what that head does have. Okay. Oh boy. Let me turn off the, there. Night.
In the daytime.
Oh, this is classic craft. And look how low it is.
I told you.
This is your triangular craft. Now the DC-9 has similar type of lighting. Oh my God, it's brightening. Its left light, it's on our right. That is typical craft. Now it's turning towards us.
Yep, I see it. I see it with the binoculars. I see it better than anybody.
Oh, I'm getting this on film. This is great. Changed. Oh God! But see how golden it is?
Yep.
That is atypical. That is the typical plasma light. The golden color is because of the fact that you're having plasmas. Oh my goodness! Look at this. And you have a light in the back. That's fine. Oh my God! Look at all the lights around it that are flashing.
Well, there's also a car driving down his parking thing again, put the lights on, like I told you to do. Something's going on here. Look at that thing, it's just hovering.
There's no tree. It was turning out the left light and making it into little balls, you know? Or is it, yeah, it's behind the tree branches now. Well, it's going very, very slowly.
It's going sideways
Yep.
now.
They do that. The triangular craft do that. Now this is an anomaly. Even if it makes a sound like a jet when it comes over us, notice it should be, we should hear a sound by now.
Well, not like that, it should be here by now. Here it comes, slowly. How slow and quiet it is.
I know.
Now it's turning. Now it's going regular speed.
Well, it hasn't even cleared the top of the trees yet. It's got another, quite a, hey, it is just staying right back there behind the trees.
I hear it now.
Okay, we got another light on top. This is the diamond. Oh my God. This is definitely craft. Remember, they can produce any sound they want. Oh, that top light is moving forward. And I bet it's going to come down to the side of the other one. I see the outline. It's a perfect triangle. Holy shit. Yep. Well, wait a minute. We got a light at the tail, way out in the back. Now that makes me suspicious. But notice as the lights are flashing, it's not illuminating the tail. The tail light is not flashing. So that... Oh, that's typical sound of the manta ray.
Well, that sounds like a jet.
Well, that's exactly what the manta ray does. I have a perfect copy of this. Yeah, that is the manta ray. And it makes a sound like that. Notice those two lights were vertical in front, and now they're horizontal and on the bottom. They're moving around. You just got to see. Now the back light is flashing, whereas it wasn't before.
Right.
And now that bottom light is moving underneath the craft towards the rear.
This is a picture of the flight path of this craft superimposed on the image outline of it in order to show this unusual movement as it came towards us, and then it turned, traveling sideways, and before it then took off away from us at the bottom of the graph. And when you plot this in terms of distance and the width of the two outer lights, you can see a path that indicates when it was actually turning sideways, oriented sideways in the green, as it was still moving towards us all the way over to the far right, where it stopped, and then it moved away from us as it departed. But the important thing here to note is that this graph demonstrates that it was floating on the air like an ice skater would be moving on the ice and turn around backwards before and push off on the ice in order to go in a different direction. The craft was doing the same thing as it floated on a gravity cushion, you could say, above the ground. And here are three images of the manta ray as it was turning. In the lower one, it's oblique. In the center image, it's nearly sideways, and at the top, it is sideways, still coming towards us, the observers.
Bear right up here or go straight. Let's see if the Sonny's Diner was rebuilt. Yep. Oh, man, they call it Walden Diner. Okay. The diner here. Yep. That was all replaced. It's right here. It's really low. There's no airstrip there.
You guys were over here, not over there.
As Herm and I were driving south on Route 208 and spotted that pair of lights that we thought was an aircraft, it began to back up all the way to that street light in the video. And then as we stopped, it started to move forward towards us and descend into the field behind commercial buildings to our left.
What was scientifically documented in the field? Supersonic flyby silent with no violent shock wave. Use of plasma lights rather than lamps for lights. Performed aerial maneuvers and created sky glyphs. Targeted individuals on the ground and went out of their way to make contact. They can fly silently or project various types of sounds. They can influence electronic devices remotely. They typically take off from farm fields and land in where there are no conventional airports. Aerobatic performances are done at night, below 1,000 feet altitude, over populated neighborhoods, and producing right-angle turns. They can move their lights independently of the craft and can time those movements to the thoughts and actions of the people on the ground. On 10th of May, 1994, I had the opportunity of flying in a helicopter over the hotspot area. A Japanese camera crew was there wanting to do a piece on Ellen Crystal and me and what we were finding in the valley. And after we had flown over to Stewart International Airport, and we came west, traveling over Walden, New York, over the Wallkill River, and I was taking pictures from seated between the pilot on my left and the Japanese cameraman on the right, who was strapped in with his beta cam hanging out the side of the bubble-shaped canopy on the helicopter. As we were flying along, I was focusing in my viewfinder in my single reflex camera an area ahead in this image, and I went to take a picture, and all of a sudden we were buzzed by a craft that was traveling at least at Mach 5. Here you can see the craft outlined in the picture that I took. You might ask, well, how in the world could I have gotten a picture of a craft that was traveling at over 3,000 miles an hour in the lower atmosphere? And you can see the shape of this craft outlined in with the black symbol lines, showing that it was triangular and pointed at the front with two brilliant plasma lights up front that were reducing the shock that was in front of it, so you did not get a sonic boom. But you also notice that there was a blurred lights on the far side, disturbed by a visible shock wave behind the craft that literally bounced our helicopter as it flew by. I framed a distant image with my Minolta XG7 camera viewfinder and went to push the shutter button. Suddenly, a voice in my head loudly said, "Wait!" I looked at the pilot to my left and at the Japanese cameraman to my right, but neither was talking to me or looking at me. I went to take the picture again, but as I started to push the shutter button, the same voice said, "Wait!" So I waited, holding my camera and pointing at the same area. Suddenly the voice said, "Now!" I pushed my camera button. The witnesses in the helicopter saw a bright flash of light marking the path of an object flying in front of the helicopter, traversing the valley in a second. The helicopter was gently bounced by a shock wave. The pilot moaned in surprise. There was no sound. This type of encounter happened 2 more times in a period of 20 minutes. The shutter speed was 1,000th of a second on my camera. And here are the other 2 images on the other side of the valley. The same thing happened. I went to push the button, and a voice in my head said, "Wait, now." And when I pushed the button, I captured the bright lights of it just entering the field of the camera. That's the only way that I could have captured something flying that fast. Try to take a picture of a bullet flying out of a rifle or a gun if you don't know when that gun is going to be fired. And these are the 3 locations where this happened in the valley, right around the hot spot. The use of plasma lights rather than lamps for lights. Here's the manta ray that was captured on 25th of January 1997. As it flew over us, it was producing multicolored lights in different positions where conventional aircraft do not have structure, if it was a winged aircraft. This will replay, and you can see the multiple lights flashing on it in different positions, and some in positions where there wouldn't be any wing or fuselage. And it also had this strange light up on top. This craft slowed to a stop over a farm field on the opposite side of the Dogleg Bend at West Searsville Road, and waited for the camera shutter to close before diving down out of sight and disappearing into the ground. I was using infrared film at the time, which clearly demonstrates the amount of heat coming from its lights. And you can see the irregular shape of its lights. as they flashed, indicating that these are not lamps, but individual plasmas. And as it slowed, the strobes got closer and closer together until they are superimposed on one another on the left. And that's a picture of the negative. The important thing to realize is that that this pilot did not want me to take a picture of it going into the ground. So as it stopped and waited, it was like a standoff. And I said, I kept on getting this thought in my head that its lights was going to burn a hole in my negative, which was false. But that convinced me to switch to the next frame in my camera, which had a power drive to advance the film, and it was electronically operated by a switch in my hand. So, and I pushed released the button to close the shutter, and pushed the button almost as fast as my finger could go, and in that fraction of a second, it dove into the ground and disappeared. Another thing that happens, quite typically happened to us, is that these craft would put on performances and come at us and arc over us and then dive in the other direction, on the other opposite side of us. Here's a case that happened on the 4th of September 1992 with Ellen Crystal and me, and Fred Brock being present to witness this. You can see in the map in the lower left, the arrow pointing in the direction of the red line representing the craft as it came down from the sky, went behind a tree row, came between the trees over a farm field, and then corrected its position, and then flew directly over us, climbing as it came towards us, arcing over us, and disappearing behind us.
That's alien. No lights underneath. They're all at the outer edges. Nice sound. Jeez. Oh, sure.
So here we have the manta ray giving me one of my first witnessed recordings on this. Ellen Crystal had her video and I had my time exposures. And the pilot did something spectacular. He broke up the light on the right of the craft to our left. In the images in the center, you can see that the plasma was being broken up into plasma bubbles. And this was confirmed by a plasma scientist. And the plasmas are igniting the air, causing nitrogen and oxygen to combine to form nitrous oxide gas, that brown gas, in the typical fire in the sky images people describe of seeing UFOs. And this is the path that they typically took. They would brighten their lights to get our attention and start the performance, and then arc over us and disappear behind trees on the other side of us. And I put 4 graphs here, one of an aircraft, number 1, and how its lights can look as though they brighten a little bit as the aircraft changes its orientation to the camera. But in 2, 3, and 4, the lights were significantly increased in brightness right before the craft began its run at the cameras. And here on the 28th of October 1995, again at the Owens Dairy Farm, a group of us were on the mound, and we photographed this craft coming up out of the ground, presumably, and arcing up and over us. And how do we know that it was not a helicopter or a drone? Notice the loops that it made at its very highest point, its apogee. That's something that conventional aircraft and drones cannot do. So, what was scientifically documented? Performed aerial maneuvers to create sky glyphs. Here's a whole montage of S-shaped sky glyphs that these craft attempted to make, some more perfect than others. On the 23rd of June 1994, the 20th of September 1992, the 8th of October 1993, and the 2nd of June 1993. And then we get this spectacular image on the 28th of April 1993. Here is a craft that was rising up over the Owens Dairy Farm. We were stationed again at the Dogleg Bend on West Searsville Road, and I took this time exposure. Actually, there are two time exposures spliced together. And in the middle of the first time exposure, the lights flared and then dimmed down. And you can see some different images of that central part in different contrast colors to be able to show you what was there. And this image was a center of attention for a show on the History Channel, UFO Hunters, and called the UFO vortexes. They thought this was a vortex opening up and then closing. But if you take a look at it in detail here, you can see that there are different colored orbs within rings of light around the central light, and that there is a blue orb off to the right with some irregular motion of light below it. And that bothered me. It didn't look like a vortex opening to me. It looked like they were trying to symbolize a solar system with a binary star, such as here. So this is my current interpretation, that they may have actually been illustrating our solar system, and that we have an invisible blue star for our companion star to our normal regular sun. Targeted individuals on the ground and went out of their way to make contact. Can fly silently or project various types of sounds. Can influence electrical devices remotely. On the 29th of September 1995, the Manta Ray gave me one spectacular performance. I was at the Dogleg Bend on West Searsville Road again, and I would suspect that a craft was not a conventional aircraft if it was flying well below 1,500 feet, and certainly below 1,000 feet, which was illegal for any conventional or military aircraft to fly at that altitude above the ground, especially an area that was residential and had farms and homes living. So on the 29th of September 1995, I saw this light very low to the ground, and I took a photograph of number 1 here, showing it right above the trees. And then it changed its lights, and it turned in photograph number 2 towards me and brightened its lights and came at me in a snaking fashion. And I didn't start to hear sound on it until the third or fourth image in this time exposure sequence. Then after it flew over me, it dove behind Thompson Ridge behind, and then came out between a gap to the south, flew right on top of the treetops. As you can see, the yellow line indicating just how low it was based on time exposures. And then it flew back to where it had been, traveling down the valley, and continued on its way. This is the frequency spectrogram of the sounds as it came towards me. And listen to the sound, a jet-like sound it was producing when it got to me. And then after it flew over the top of me and jammed my recorder and camera for a moment, it produced a completely different sound.
But it doesn't look like a jet. Wait a minute. This is no jet. I'm looking through here. It's just like
My God. What the? Boy, you guys got good sound here. Lots of turbine sound.
You'll notice that the frequencies dropped as it came towards me, typical of reverse Doppler. And then in this slide, you can see the jet-like sound that it initially produced. And then after it flew over and it jammed my audio recorder for a moment, and then it produced a different sound. These craft can take off, typically occur from farm fields and forests, and landings also occur in farm fields and forests. This was on the 24th of October, 1994. A group of us were standing at the north end of West Searsville Road. Even George Filer was there with us to witness this event. And we saw lights turn on behind some trees across a field to our east, and then gradually lift up and rise up into the air. The trees in the foreground break up the light as it's climbing. Then it turned around when it got up above a certain altitude and flew back south. And as it flew back south, it did a spiral down flight path and literally went right into the forest and disappeared into its underground base. And here's a picture from the air showing where the forest it disappeared into, and the yellow arrow was the direction of the camera as the craft came down and went into the ground. And here's that last picture showing the lights traveling through the trees, through the forest, and the very last light is where the white arrow is pointing, where it disappeared below ground. Here's the manta ray that came to visit me in Red Bank, New Jersey.
When I lived in Red Bank, New Jersey, commercial air traffic was occasionally rerouted over Red Bank from the coastal path to Kennedy Airport near Long Island. And on this particular night, on the 24th of April, 1997, several large commercial aircraft flew over the house, shaking it, and I grabbed my camcorder and went out to the back. And as I did, I discovered or saw this very strange craft coming very low, pass by the house to the west, and as it passed, it rotated clockwise 180 degrees so that it always kept its front lights pointed towards the camera, and it left the area flying backwards. Notice that blue light, pair of blue lights that move around as it's rotating. There was no white noise produced by its sound, indicating that it was not a turbofan engine.
There it is, moving away, same orientation, but now it has to be flying backwards. And I analyzed all of this to give you an idea. I mean, the average speed was 28 miles per hour. Certainly not a conventional jet. And the blue lights kept on moving and showing the arrows how the blue lights moved around on it. You could still see the blue lights as it moved away. Aerobatic performance is done at night below 1,000 feet altitude over populated neighborhoods. Right-angle turns. Twice I captured right-angle turns. Actually, the one on the left is by Mark Whitford, who was standing next to me taking this picture of a black triangle as it did its right-angle turn, and with its strobes, the strobes do not change. There are no missing strobes during the right-angle turn, indicating that it was a true physical maneuver of the craft. And on the right, you can see the performance during the 29 April sightings camera crew performance, where the black triangle that came at us first did a pair of right-angle turns right in front of us, and you can see the loop that it made as it came towards us, circled in front of us, and then went back and disappeared behind the trees in the distance. And the arrow showing where that right-angle turn occurs. Then on the 17th of May, 1997, Mark Whitford and I and his girlfriend witnessed a black triangle put on a performance that he was later told by somebody in the Navy that this was the TR-3B. I don't know if it really was. All I can know is what we were being told, that came and deliberately gave us a performance, quite a spectacular performance. This is what we saw standing on Muddy Kill Lane, looking towards the north at these pair of lights, just hovering. And then they started moving towards us. And you can see a series of still frames from my video showing how it tilted without banking and then brightened its right light and very significantly, and then dimmed it.
This looks like a craft. But don't be surprised if it flies over, it's going to sound like a jet. Something else behind it that's flashing. This thing's going so slowly.
The time is 11:11:03. We're looking north from Muddy Kill Lane at a possible TLP. TLP appears to be heading south to the southeast. It appears to be constant altitude despite the shaky handheld camera.
It's coming very slowly. Now it's starting to bank to its...
Hold the camera. Now it's starting to bank towards us. Okay, now hold the B down for a count of 30 seconds, 9, okay? Ready? Hold it down now. Time's 11:57. I'm sorry, 11:11 and 57.
I'm still holding it down.
Yes, keep holding it down. Keep holding it down. Is it still in the viewfinder? Do not move the camera.
The viewfinder's dark.
Do not move the camera.
I'm not. Let me find the start.
All right, let go.
It's-
You have to hold it again. Hold it down.
Make sure
Hold
that
it
when
down.
you,
The time is 11, 12, and 24 seconds. Okay. The possible TLP seems to be heading directly for us.
Still holding.
yeah, make sure that when
Release
she
the camera.
releases it, Mark, that she looks through and makes sure she's got it in her
You still have
viewfinder.
it in there? Okay, release it. Move
Still
the
have
camera.
it
Look, move the camera,
and
make
keep
sure
holding
it's in your viewfinder.
it. My battery is dying. I'm getting a battery warning, even though we charged the battery tonight.
That right light on it, it's so bright on this thing.
Okay, the light on the
Oh, we have it
right
down
side.
again?
Yes, hold it again.
Holding it down.
Yes. The camera was started at 11:13 in 1 second.
Still holding.
Holding the camera. Okay, the lights are flaring.
Still holding.
TLP appears to be still heading almost directly towards us.
Still holding.
Okay, we're continuing.
It's a golden light, isn't it?
Where do I
The
let
lights
go?
let go. That was 11:13 and 20 seconds. Okay, reposition the camera. We're starting to hear the sound now. The sound appears to be that of a jet. The craft appears to be banking again to the left. It's visible. There's a blinking red light in the center.
You ready to shoot again?
Yeah, shoot. Okay. 11:13 and 49 seconds was the start.
I'm holding.
Craft, possible TLP, displaying a delta shape. There are 3 sets of lights, 1 in the front, 2 in the back. The center blinks red and the right
It just turned over, it's on its back.
just turned over. Let go. That was 11:14 and 13 seconds. Slide the camera.
It's flying on its back.
Okay. The craft appears to be heading towards southwest. I'm sorry, southeast. 11:14 and 32 seconds. Video. Okay. Release. It's out of view. Okay. Start again. 11:14, 49 seconds. Train is operating the film camera. Mark Whitford is operating the video camera. Press coordinate.
Let's get the sound, don't talk.
Turning to the left.
I think that guy turned upside down.
Here I show an animated GIF of it doing its rollover onto its back and the strobes on it. Very unusual and clearly deliberate, strobing its different lights at different points in time. Also on the bottom I have a series of images from my camcorder, still frames, showing the rollover onto its back. What is important here to note is that once it was on its back, it rotated so that it was flying away sideways, and then it flipped over onto its front again and started to descend. Here we can see where it actually flipped over at that particular point, being pointed out here, and the time exposure taken by Donna Bertrand shows that it did not turn away from us. Somebody might say that, well, it was just a conventional aircraft banking away from us. Well, that's not possible if you have the images on the time exposure showing no turning whatsoever. And on the bottom, there's some images taken by Kenny Young in 1994. This is quite a few years before we witnessed this one in 1997, and showing the same type of rollover maneuver of a triangular craft. And then it decided to descend. The pilot descended, but as the craft was descending, it was slowing down. And how do we know this? You see in the enlargement in the upper right that the strobes on it are getting closer and closer and closer together as it descends, and showing the spacing, a 5-second spacing of the strobes, indicating that if this was a conventional aircraft, it was descending directly towards the ground and slowing down. Gravity would have pulled it faster and faster if that had been a conventional aircraft. Then once it got near the ground, it flew behind the trees and disappeared into a neighboring farm field. And at the beginning of this time exposure, it released a large amount of plasma that you can see coming up above the craft as it brightened its light. And that was the last image we got of it that evening. And this is the path that it took. Not something that you would expect a conventional aircraft to do. So whoever put on this performance was putting on a deliberate maneuver for our cameras. And as I mentioned before, Mark Whitford was told by a friend in the Navy. He was in the Navy himself, and his friend told him that we had been given permission by the Pentagon for the Skunk Works to demonstrate their TR-3B for us. Whether or not that is true, I don't know, but it was clearly a performance. These craft can move their lights independently of the craft and can time those movements to the thoughts and actions of people on the ground. This is where I became aware of the movements of the lights right after I would open the shutter of my camera. And I kept on getting these movements that lasted, these oscillations, for as much as 5 to 10 seconds. I did experiments on my camera to see what type of vibration the shutter would create when it opened, and it was nothing like this. So these were deliberate oscillations created when I would start my time exposures. And then in this particular case, the pilot produced oscillations before I closed the shutter. So you can see that there was a period of time after I opened the shutter before the oscillations started, and the oscillations began before I closed the shutter. This was a case where I learned that they were reading my mind. So I did not say in my head, open shutter, close shutter. So I just opened the shutter and I waited for a moment and then thought, open shutter. And in the bottom one, I thought, close shutter, and then waited a moment and I closed the shutter. So you see clearly that the evidence for the pilot reading my mind and corresponding, producing an action. Then in this other image on the 5th of October 1993, 3 images of the same craft. You can see the times below the photographs, and producing a different type of a light feature, a brightening on the left one, a tail on the central one, and an oscillation on the right one, the third image. Clearly produced at the origin of the craft, not by my camera. And here is on the 26th of March 1994, this craft waited for us at the along West Searsville Road, and then started a run towards us. And just as I opened the shutter to take the picture, it moved its 2 central lights, not its running lights, its red and green running lights, just the 2 central lights did it, creating a tail. Another indication that this came from the pilot, not my camera. And other types of movements that these craft would produce are the oscillations, for example, the loops. In the top picture, the craft is producing these alternating loops to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right as it's moving along. And also, I got pictures where they were doing spirals, causing their lights to spiral through the air, as you can see in the lower two photographs. Then on the 25th of July, 1998, a UAP tried to make me think it was just a traffic light at a rural intersection west of Wallkill, New York. I was traveling north on Albany Post Road. There are only stop signs at this intersection. It had two lights, which it changed from white to red, and then as I stopped, then it turned its lights to green. I drove directly under it as I turned left onto Bruin Turnpike. And here's images of it changing color. In the top left, it's white. In the center, it's reddish. In the right, it's green. Right over the intersection, you can see the stripe in the road here on the lower left in the embossed image, as well as reflections off other objects on the front of the craft, and even a slight indication of its domed top. Now I'm going to show you the video from which the screen captures were taken. Here we see the satellite view of the location, the Albany Post and Bruin Turnpike intersection. You see where I was shot back on the 18th of June, 1992. Here's the intersection, and the stop sign can be seen leaning over on the right. The lights turn reddish, then they turn green, and I turn almost directly under it. Here they tilted to the left to try to mimic a set of traffic lights. Then they turned green, and I moved ahead underneath it. You can see in this embossed image reflections off various parts of it, the front of it, as well as the curvature of a transparent dome on top. Back on the 29th of April 1993, I may have caught a picture of the same craft sitting on a lawn on the east side of Thompson Ridge. You can see a hexagonal shape, multiple lights, as well as a light in the center behind which there appears to be a silhouette of a pilot and possibly a second crew member behind that pilot. Gives you a good indication that it had a transparent top for us to be able to see the pilot inside. And then 5 years later, it met me the last time and pretended it was a traffic light. Now I'm going to talk about something different, about the UBO that I discovered below the Jewish cemetery along Route 54 between Walden and Pine Bush, New York. Here I'm showing the 24 square mile magnetic map that I generated between 1992 and 1995, in which you have the Pine Bush, Walker, Walden, and Montgomery shown, along with the magnetic highs in purple that may be the tops of buried mountains, which were once exposed as islands in an ancient 420 million year old late Ordovician sea. Here I show a map of just the magnetic highs running up the center of the valley, with the green circles representing the locations where UAP have been witnessed. And you'll notice a very close correlation with these magnetic highs. At the one under the Jewish cemetery is where we found the underground alien probe embedded in Ordovician rocks. While mapping a 24 square mile area in 1992, I discovered areas where anomalous magnetic signals were coming out of the ground. Under the Jewish cemetery, I found 3 equidistant magnetic transmitters that orient a central signal beam. In November 2007, a GPR, or ground-penetrating radar survey, imaged a solid object 9 feet below the surface. It is a nuclear-powered triangular probe about 565 feet on its side. The History Channel featured this object in their UFO Vortexes episode in March 2008. Why has no one wanted to excavate it and confirm the existence of an alien probe that landed on an island in the Ordovician Sea 400 million years ago? It became entombed in black marine shale as the region subsided. The government has monitored it. It is still there. What I envision is that back during the Ordovician, alien probes came and discovered Earth and were looking for rare earth minerals and other resources. Here I show a triangular craft spiraling down and landing on one of the islands in an archipelago of islands that existed in this valley. 420 million years ago is almost at the beginning of the Phanerozoic, where life, the first complex multicellular life, it can be found in fossils. Here's the cemetery and the History Channel crew with Bill Burns representing there on the right. And the interesting thing about this is that Phil and Lynn Lynch recorded the ice on top of this structure melting during the winter. There was enough heat being produced by this object that it melted the ice and produced running water when the outside temperature was below freezing. Then the local Jewish community moved the fence to include the tree on the right and the location of the one of the transmitters, so that make it less accessible. Clearly they understood why people were coming to the cemetery, and they wanted to discourage activity there. And here you can see on the lower left the ground penetrating radar instrument that was used to image the craft. Here showing in the orange dots of equidistant from one another the magnetic beams that I actually measured the data coming from them when they were active. And you can see a red dot in the center where Phil and Lynn saw a white light coming out of the ground next to the cemetery. Notice that the signal beams are 468 feet between them, and the estimated side of the craft is 565 feet. This is enormous, and it's only located about 9 feet below the surface. And initially, when I took these readings at the Jewish cemetery, one of the beams was coming out right next to that tree. And these are the results I got when I was recording for about a minute, and showing that all of the values that are up here are well above background, which is at the bottom of the graph. And when I mapped recorded all three different angles of the triangle, I got different signals coming out, indicating that each one was sending some sort of signal out into space, probably coordinating the direction of the central beam so that it would hit its given target. What I also discovered was that when these signal beams were active, the constellation Bootes was overhead. Now, how did I happen to catch the signals when they were active? I kept on going back to that same location again and again. Every night I went out to do any measurements, I would take measurements in front of the cemetery, and that's how I discovered when they were active and that the Bootes constellation was directly overhead. So here the History Channel camera crew was out there and showing the beams coming out. The gray beam here on the right would be the central signal beam, and the yellow beams would be the magnetic beams coming out of the ground. And Ellen Crystal actually witnessed with a friend a black triangle hovering over this buried UBO. And this is what the ground penetrating radar images show. They show a structure right here underneath, only 9 feet below the surface, and clearly modifying the sediment around that entombs the craft, indicating that the craft is part of the formation and is as old as the rocks are, which have been dated to the Ordovician period, late Ordovician. And again, this was a stylized diagram that I drew, showing the position of the edge of the craft and the GPR data that goes across the edge of it. Thank you very much. My book is available.